As an employee of Plattsburgh State University, you have a right to know about information relating to potential chemical hazards. New York State and OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, require that information be provided to you about the hazardous chemicals to which you are exposed by means of a hazard communication program, labels, and other forms of warning, safety data sheets, and information and training. 29 CFR 1910-1200 states that HazCom applies to any chemical which is known to be present in the workplace in such a manner that employees may be exposed under normal conditions or in a foreseeable emergency. Throughout your day, you will encounter various types of chemicals. Many of these can cause injury if not handled properly. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, defines a hazardous chemical as any chemical which is classified as a physical hazard or a health hazard, a simple asphyxiant, combustible dust, pyrophoric gas, or hazard not otherwise classified. Employees should be aware of both the physical and health hazards of chemicals in their workplace. The physical hazards to be aware of are chemicals that are flammable, explosive, violent expansion of gases, reactive, such as can burn, explode, or release toxic vapor if exposed to other chemicals, heat, or water, a compressed gas, or are radioactive. Health hazards are associated with chemicals that are corrosive, irritants, sensitizers, toxic, highly toxic, or carcinogens. Both physical and health hazards can have acute effects, which show up soon after exposure, or chronic effects, which usually take a longer time to develop. Chemicals can enter your body through a variety of routes. The 4 primary exposure pathways are inhalation, ingestion, absorption, and injection. Inhalation is the most rapid route of entry. Once inhaled, toxic substances are either exhaled or deposited in the respiratory tract. If deposited, damage can occur through direct contact with the tissue, or the chemical may diffuse into the blood. Once the substance is in the bloodstream, it can quickly be transported to the organs. Chemicals can cross the skin barrier and be absorbed into the bloodstream, thus having direct routes to the internal organs. The eyes are particularly sensitive to absorption. This is in addition to the damage that can be caused to the skin itself by contact with the hazardous material. Ingestion is the least likely route of exposure, but chemicals that are soluble in the fluids of the gastrointestinal tract can be absorbed through the lining of the gastrointestinal tract. They are then transported through the bloodstream to internal organs, where they can cause extensive damage. Substances can enter the body if the skin is penetrated or punctured by contaminated objects. The substance can then be circulated through the bloodstream and deposited in target organs. The HazCom standard requires us to have a list of all the chemicals on site. SUNY Plattsburgh has the Vertera Chemical Inventory Manager. You can access Vertera through the PSU Shortcuts folder on your desktop. Your login information is your regular net ID and a password that will be set by the Chemical Hygiene Officer, or CHO, or the Environmental Health and Safety Office, EHS. You can use Vertera to look up the location of a chemical, to see the inventory of specific rooms, or to print up a list for emergency personnel, should the need arise. If you need any assistance with the Vertera system, contact your CHO or the EHS office. Chemical manufacturers, importers, and distributors must ensure that each container of hazardous chemicals being distributed out of their care is labeled, tagged, or marked with the following information: a product identifier, such as the chemical name, a signal word, a hazard statement, pictograms, precautionary statements, and the name, address, and telephone number of the chemical manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party. If the chemical manufacturer, importer, or distributor becomes aware of any significant changes, they must revise the label within 6 months of becoming aware of the new information and ensure that the labels on containers of hazardous materials shipped after that time contain the new information. The employer may not remove or deface existing labels on incoming containers of hazardous chemicals unless the container is immediately marked with the required information. In the workplace, chemical containers must contain a product identifier and words, pictures, symbols, or a combination thereof, which provide at least general information regarding the hazards of the chemicals. These workplace labels and warning methods must be legible in English and prominently displayed. In conjunction with safety data sheets, this will provide employees with specific information regarding the physical and health hazards of the hazardous chemical. A secondary container should say the chemical name and all physical and health hazards. However, it is not necessary to label portable containers into which hazardous materials are being transferred, as long as they are used immediately by the person who did the transfer. You can request pictogram stickers from your CHO for your use. OSHA requires chemical manufacturers and importers to supply a safety data sheet, or SDS, with each hazardous chemical they produce or import. SUNY Plattsburgh keeps our SDS on file for each hazardous chemical that we use. Our SDS are stored on ChemWatch, an online safety data sheet database. You can access ChemWatch by opening the link in your PSU Shortcuts folder on your desktop or using the QR code that is located in all of our laboratories. There are tutorials within the software for generating labels using an SDS and for using the ChemWatch software to access SDS. A safety data sheet, or SDS, must be comprised of 16 sections and must be in English. The SDS contains such relevant information as the hazards of the chemical, the handling and storage information, the toxicological information, exposure control information, proper disposal methods, and all other relevant safety data. An SDS must be available for every hazardous chemical on site and is shipped with each chemical from the manufacturer or distributor. The SDS must be readily accessible during any work shift. The globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals standardized hazard classification and labeling internationally. This chart shows the GHS pictograms and signal words for hazard classification. The SDS includes the GHS pictograms and signal words, which facilitates the labeling process and clarifies the hazards. It is essential to always wear the appropriate types of personal protective equipment for the hazardous chemicals you are working with. The safety data sheet gives recommendations for PPE specific to the chemical you are using. Should you get a chemical on yourself, immediately rinse in the nearest safety shower or eye wash for at least 15 minutes. While in the shower, remove any contaminated clothing and have someone call 911 to request assistance. Review the SDS for any additional first aid measures and print a copy for emergency personnel if possible. Report the incident promptly to your CHO and EH&S. There are accident reporting forms in the first aid kits in each lab and classroom. If there's a spill in your lab, you should only begin cleanup procedures if you have been trained to do so and there is at least one other person in the lab to assist you. You should also only attempt cleanup of simple spills. Simple spills are those that do not spread rapidly, do not endanger people or property except by direct contact, and do not endanger the environment. To determine whether a spill is simple or complex, which is often the hardest part of spill response, you need to know, number 1, the hazards posed by the spilled chemical, and number 2, the spill's potential impact. Both of these factors are, in large part, determined by the spill's size. The following information will help you determine whether you have a simple spill. The type of chemical spilled, the amount, the hazardous characteristics of the spilled chemicals, the location, the proper method for cleaning up the spill. the personal protective equipment available, and the training of the laboratory's personnel. The SDS gives instructions for spill cleanup of hazardous chemicals. Always wear the appropriate PPE for spill cleanup and make sure you have the correct type of spill kit available. Our labs all have spill kits, usually located under the eye wash station. Be sure to evacuate unprotected employees. Always report the spill to the CHO and EH&S. Call 911 if the spill is complex and/or greater than 500 mils. Remove ignition sources as long as you can safely do so. Don PPE and begin containment and cleanup. Keep others out of the area until the spill has been cleaned up. Information and training on hazardous chemicals in the work area must be provided to all employees at the time of their initial assignment and whenever a new hazardous chemical is introduced. New York State requires employees to receive Right to Know training every year. Please follow the link to answer 5 quiz questions to verify you have understood the material. If you have any questions, please fill out the linked Google Doc and your question will be answered in a forum. As always, please contact your CHO or EH&S with any questions or concerns. Thank you for your participation during this module.